Hello, today we analyze the parts of an inventory and will actually build one with Common UI. I highly recommend the GameUIDatabase.com to really have a look at different inventories, and let's have a look at a couple of them, how they are structured. That is Genshin Impact. This here is No Man's Sky. Another one here, that's the Long Dark. Yeah, kind of similar MLM elements, and we will take here the Horizon Zero Dawn and kind of analyze it, what it is made of. At the top we have this carousel widget switcher. On the left we have something, a column, for example, for bag selection or something. In the middle is the main area with the center grid, where we see normally our inventories and the items. On the right we see details, for example, for selected items. On the footer there could be some navigation elements. Then looking at the column grid, we might have some sorting, filtering at the top. And at the bottom, we might have something like summaries or maybe coins or weight or something like that. So let's have a look what we actually build and will build here in this tutorial. It's kind of the same thing, more or less. We are still on our demo map. We have in the middle our center area. We have at the top our carousel. We have on the left, for example, bag selection. In the middle, we have things for filtering, sorting. On the top or on the bottom, we have something for the summary. Here we have a map and a great character creation and a crafting. So that's our carousel, obviously not really finished, but we will concentrate on the inventory today. And especially on the middle area. So let's try it out. We get a bag, we start running in this field here, and you see we get more and more icons. The icons consist of a picture of the item, some new font, some name, and a kind of border that seems to correlate with the grading. So common, uncommon, epic, and stuff like that. You also see that we have a scroll possibility, so it reacts to the mouse wheel. We can also manually scroll it. So yeah, kind of base things for inventories are there. Now it's a bit hard to see, but let's try it out here. Running against this should delete a couple of items, and yeah, they're actually going away. We have empty slots now, more and more. Next, we'll condense them, meaning deleting or removing these empty slots. Yeah, done. Now the next one will sort by name. So let's have a look. Running against it, maybe scrolling a bit up. On the bottom we have Futerium, Y and A. Yeah, looks good. So sorting by name does work. Then we have here the grades. Or common, uncommon, epic, legendary, artifact thing, yeah, also working quite well. So these base things are also a tooltip for each of the items. So let's say these base functionalities, collecting items, showing items, sorting and stuff, that is already there. What is definitely missing is single item actions, dropping, sorting, combining, sorting is there, combining them, things like that, or exchanging with a different inventory, yeah, like putting them in a chest. That is not there. We will concentrate today only on this base functionality and how really to plan the widgets and define the widgets and how transfer information to the widgets. That's the scope for today, so that we start with zero and kind of have this single inventory ready. Good, let's start as usual with our BA inventory processes. I will publish the PDF as always. On the left you see also links to the videos. And what we do here today is this common UI box on the right, kind of separated between kind of server functions and client functions. Server functions start with the inventory components. That's the one that we discussed in former videos. The component that sits on the actor and will do all the communication with our item and inventory manager, the central instance. It's a GameFeature, meaning you just have to really put it in data-driven into this configuration file and just from the outside tell the third-person character to have these components. We invented a second one here, this UI graphical component. That's the component that is responsible to do the communication with the different widgets. So from a structure here, it's a plugin, a GameFeature plugin. We have here the inventory, we have here the base functionalities, the most important components, and then we link to it. The communication is done as usual via this tag-based channels. To add a tag, you go to your directory, you add a directory config and then tags. Here you have to use a file name, exact the same name as your plugin, for example, is called. And then you can just define the gameplay text that will be loaded on load with your game. We already used the inventory text. Now we're using the very same for inventory GUI, so the graphical components. And both are just actor components. So you just enable, disable, and then you have these inventories and components just being there. So the BAUI graphical component, it's the one starting to communicate with the client. Everything is happening here on a server, on the server side. But this one, obviously an inventory is something graphical, so it needs to be executed on the client and updated on the client. Other than that, it's just listening for gameplay messages, our standard way to transfer information between blueprints or throughout the game. As usual, the gameplay messages are running on a certain channel that is defined by a gameplay tag, and they will use a struct to exchange information left and right. One of these very first widgets, the root widget, that is my HUD widget. And this HUD widget is created here in this component and is communicated with. Very important, the owning client will never receive our full item objects. Two reasons here. One reason is, all your gamers are cheaters, so they should not get their fingers on the object itself, only on a reduced struct. That is what we do here, Really, on initialize, we make sure that we listen to gameplay messages and react. We create a HUD, and the HUD is created on the owning client and is initialized there and can be seen there, and only then. So, what is the first level that we have to design within the HUD? One thing is, you never will put all your widget information in one layer. You have to think about different layers. I have 4 layers here, kind of the same as Lyra actually does. The lowest layer is for game-related information that are always there. For example, I just put here a kind of debug information in there, frames per second, something like that. This thing here on the bottom, that lies on the lowest layer. The lowest layer will be always visible, but it will never react to a mouse. That is something that I have to now tell the game. Then we have this first layer, that is things, game elements that are always visible, like maybe your portrait or your health bar, something like that. What we work today on is these game elements that are temporarily visible. That could be an inventory, a map, something like that. And then we have this model layer. The model, that is for something that needs to be visible, definitely, for example, a confirmation box, something like that. That should be always on the highest layer. And here we define these layers, we initialize them, we store a reference to them, and we make sure that the game understands how are they configured, how are they stacked on each other. We set the visibility, for example, here for the layer 0 to, it's visible, but it's not hittable. So you will never use your mouse to interact with it. Then, quite important, is bind visibility to activation. So we can say, okay, it's only visible if this is not activated. Meaning the first layer will stay visible, but it will not react to mouse events, for example, if the second layer is there. And the same for the second layer if the third layer is there, and so on and so on. So meaning here we can define which layer will react to keyboard, controllers, or mouse events, and set the visibility, the initial visibility, that we can of course manipulate during the gameplay. Here in this regard, actually, we just make it permanently visible, the inventory, as soon as it's there. That is something we will fix in the next video, thinking about common UI and how to redirect input information. Here, same thing, bind visibility to activation, add to viewport, set visibility. These are the standard things that you do for each layer, really thinking about them stacking on each other and making sure that the right layer always receives the input information. Now let's have a look at this layer 2, the game elements. What do we need to get this basic mask of elements and what are the components that we want to have here on this first lowest layer. Okay, we have this left column. We put some selection for bags, for example. We have the right column, that might be my details. We have here a header, a main part and a footer for my inventory. And of course, we have the possibility to change between different base widgets. We only will do the inventory today. The other ones are on the backlog. So how do we structure something like that? Let's have a look at the elements that make this first thing. The common border is something that gives you the opportunity to put a background image into something. So it is only for single childs. That is one thing that you have to already think about. So it will take one single child and put an image in it. It's one part of the common UI. Then we have this grid panel. The grid panel is a very nice structure to do table-like information. Everything you put into the grid panel can be defined, how many rows, columns it spans, where it sits. So it's perfectly usable for most of your GUI. Especially if you have kind of pre-structured information like an inventory. The carousel, that is a widget switcher that you just switch widgets around in an animated layer. Kind of the same like a tab layer, only that they move around. So let's open it and have a look. So the grid panel inventory, that's, as I said, an interesting one that you will use a lot. You can define as many columns and rows as you like. And you can define kind of percentage numbers. What should be their width or height. So then we have this carousel that is one of the parts sitting in there, and we have the grid panel. So we have two rows defined. If I change, for example, here the numbers, then you just see that the relation between the row height is changing. Yeah, so you really can set up your dynamic table as you want, and it will react accordingly, and you can put your items and the child of the items into it. The grid panel here, the uniform grid panel, that is a simple panel that you just can push children into it, and it will just evenly distribute it. In our case, it's these 4 navbar buttons that you have here, and then you have the carousel. That carousel will just switch widgets from left to right, and it actually comes with a navbar that kind of should automate the whole thing that we did here manually. But I will show you the problem with the navbar. It seems to be not really ready for usage, so I had problem getting it running. So we just built our navbar manually, what is actually quite easy to do. Each of the buttons is, of the center buttons, is more or less a button setting the active widget on click. So I click a button and the active widget in the carousel will be used. On construct, it will fill some information because it needs to know what is the text on the button, what's the image on the button. For that, it has 2 public variables that you can set here the moment you place the button. One is the linked widget that it refers to, and the other one is the carousel that it refers to. So as each button knows it, it can easily query the information set in here. Let's go to the graph. So it will go, for example, to the linked widget. It will have a look if it implements a certain interface, and the interface will have a couple of functions giving the name, the description, and the symbol. The interface here, that's in the metadata. If you scroll down here, that's the iWidget identifier. It just has 3 functions, getting the widget name, the description, and the symbol, and each widget will implement that. Then we have here a nice thing, this lazy texture. That's essentially a brush texture that is loaded on demand. This lazy meaning you don't have to do anything. You just set the texture and the game logic will automatically load and unload whenever needed. I'll show you how the carousel is supposed to work and why it's not really working. So at the moment we have this carousel and we kind of predefine everything in here. Also this navigation elements, that we do it manually. And I showed they will manually at the moment switch to active widget and manually do some information. What we could in theory do, that is using a navbar and just give it a generic button widget type, and it will automatically create these buttons. That is actually working. The challenge is, if you look at the code here, these buttons are not exposed. So it will create the buttons according to the widget. It will actually switch between the widgets. But you don't have a chance to actually access the buttons from Blueprint, for example, setting the text and something like that. So that makes it a bit tricky. And the buttons also don't know, at least in Blueprint, to which widget they're pointing to. So at the moment, it's not really usable. That is something that needs to be fixed first. You have here this set linked carousel. You can link that to the navbar. It will generate the buttons. But as you don't have access to buttons, they are called button 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it, without any picture. So not usable, really. We do it manually. And as you saw, it's really quite easy. Good. Now we have this base structure with my carousel and this 3 big widgets being loaded. Inventory is the interesting one for us. So let's have a look at this BA inventory. It has again 3 parts: the left column, the middle column, the right column. And having 3 parts, naturally we start again with a grid panel. Here in this case we have 1 row, but we have different columns. The columns now have this 1, 6, 2 relation. That is something I can easily change. If I say, my detail panel should be larger or my back selection should be smaller, you can even do that on runtime. So that is a nice way to model the principal layout of the whole thing. Other than that, we have a common border around each of it so that we have the possibility to always define a certain background image if we want. And then, let's concentrate on the next layer. The next layer is this center part, this inventory center. And again, it has the same structure. It has 3 different elements. In this case, it's rows. So it has a header row, maybe for my sorting. It has a footer row for some summaries. It has a middle row. That is actually our grid. So again, we have 3 different widgets here that we can style and that we can manipulate, push with information as much as we need. All missing at the moment. The only thing that we have is a border, so at least we have a color. So let's concentrate on this inventory center grid. That is the one that is actually doing something, showing our items, and it's a common tile view. The common tile view needs a widget as an entry widget class. It scrolls for us automatically, and it offers a lot of different events for the items that you have here. So we just put the tile view in. We tell them what's the entry widget class. So what kind of widgets are actually these single items. And then we have a couple of settings for paddings, for mouse wheel reaction, for scrolling and stuff like that. We can have a couple of styling classes also for scrolling, for example. And then we have these events like on item click, on selection change. That's something that is not implemented yet, but that's of course very important to work with your inventory, drag and drop things, and so on and so on. Good. Let's have a look at this BA item view, because that is the class that is representing one single item. Now let's open that. And if you look here at the hierarchy, we are in our plugin, in our GameFeature plugin. We are in the UI, in the widget. Then I structured the widgets according to the 4 layers. And here in layer 2, the game elements, we have the center item with our BA item. The structure at the moment is quite simple. It's an image and it's some text. That's it for the moment. To be definitely extended. But if we have a look at the graph, it's doing a couple of interesting things. One thing, it has a client struct, and this struct is the information. It's all the information it will get from our server. If we remember our server, what we actually use as our item is this BP item class. That's a complicated class. It has a lot of functionality. It has these fragment structures and so on and so on. So that is what we normally use when we deal with items, but we only do that on the server side, never on the client side. So two things. It's a huge object. We don't want to transfer that, because from inventory we have to transfer quite often, quite fast, and maybe thousands of elements. So we have to keep it small. That's one reason. The other reason is, clients are cheaters. So meaning the moment they get their grabby hands on an item, on a full object, they will do something with it. That's the reason we just give them a very, very reduced struct with a couple of base information, enough to show the item, but not enough to really do something with it. Our struct here is just a name, the GUID, some stackable indicator, description, texture path, and the grade. That is enough to really look at it in the inventory without representing the full item behind. We of course need something to redirect it to an item object, but that's where the GUI comes in. This graphical component, that is, as we saw, the bridge between the server side and the client side. On the client side, the HUD is running, the widgets are running. On the server side, the items are managed. The bridge is here, moving the information from the server to the client using a struct. You actually cannot transfer simply objects to the client side. That's quite complicated, and it should not be that anyway. Use structs for it and reduce them as much as possible, so only getting the base information. Two things I want to point out. One is this convert string to image path, and the other thing is how to set the grading. Looking here at this initialize view, it takes our struct, it breaks them into the components, and it sets a couple of variables that we can reuse, for example, to show some details of the item later. And then we have this texture path. The texture path is a string that describes where the resource lies. Looking or remembering how we brought in the data with this data-driven approach, we had a data table. And the data table here for one of the chemical elements will have one line saying exactly what is the resource path. You see these dollar signs, and dollar signs are something that I want to replace, because if you remember, we stored several resolutions of that. Let's have a look in the texture here. We have 128, 256, 1K, 2K, and so on. So meaning we have different resolutions and we want to use them in different situations. So in inventory, I use the 128 resolution. As detail view, I might use the 500, for example. I copy the resource path in here. So that is really what we need to deliver to create an image out of that. How do we do that? Let's have, going down, we start with the path itself. Then we have to replace these dollar signs with the resolution that we want in this place. In this place, I say 128 pixel. So first thing is really replacing the dollar signs with this 128, and the resolution comes out of this enum to get the resolution that is hard-coded, hard set here, what resolution we want in inventory. Then we make a soft object path out of it and create a soft object reference out of it. Soft objects, as you know, can be loaded on demand and have to be unloaded manually normally, but we are using a lazy image here, and the lazy image has that functionality built in. So we fill this lazy image with our texture, and it will unload the texture the moment you don't use it anymore. For example, if it scrolls out of view. That is something we can do quite easily. Here we just set the brush from the lazy display asset. Second thing is how to make this grading border. How can we make sure that we see the grading automatically? Let's run back. In the data tables, again, the grading is something that comes with the data-driven approach. Here you have the grade like rare, epic, legendary, uncommon, and so on and so on. So that is part of the item actually. If you look at it, we just simply switch over the grading and set a different style. So we have common border styles defined for each of the different gradings, and that is what we set as a picture background. Quite simple. If you open one of them, they really just take a picture with different colors in our regard and put them as a background for your widget, for your regarding widget. So that's the common border style that we use here. Yeah, let's try it out shortly. Yeah, come on. Here we go. A bit slow. Okay, yeah, we get our inventory, we run over the field, we get the different items now. And you see, yeah, that is essentially the border style that you see, and that allows us to sort by name, but very important, by grade. And then you have a simple representation of the different grades with the different colors being available here. Good, short thing, the font, where to get it. I use the font library org, make sure that you have the right license. Yeah, I use this Creative Commons license in my stuff, so I stick with them normally. Otherwise you have a mix of licenses and makes it quite hard. So yeah, Creative Commons is an easy one. You really just look at the different fonts. There is this TTF or OTF format, both should work in Unreal. And what you essentially do, you just select the font, you download it, I set it here for 2, and then you just drop it into Unreal, and that's really it. So I use the OTF file here and close that. I say yes. I want to create a new font asset using that font face, and then it should be already there. And actually it will be immediately visible for all things that you might do with fonts. If you have some styles, for example, text styles, the common text style or something, here you just can select the font family and be done. So quite easy to really ingest new fonts. Just have a look at the license, because not every font is actually usable that way, or should be used that way. Maybe having shortly a deeper look into how to convert our original object into the struct, because that's an important point, that you think about what do you need to deliver to the client and what should stay on the server side. And should be really reduced as much as possible for speed and for security. So we have one routine here that gets from the server side an object array with these structs in it. So that is simply the struct that you saw, mostly consisting on name and stuff like that. Then we have to go through our tree of widgets. So we start with the inventory center, we go to the inventory grid, we go to the tile view, and here on the tile view we have 2 separate functions that we can manipulate our items with. Same thing here, we go to our center, we go to our grid, and here we have our tile view that we can use. So let's jump back. Yeah, 2 functions. One is clear items, so it's empty. And then we have the set list items, and that will accept an array of items that you predefined beforehand, because we said it should be the BA item view that should be used for the list items, and that is exactly what you have to deliver then. Let's find it again and open it. Here on the right, you have the entry widget class. That's the BA item view. So it's a widget that you have to deliver here. And that's exactly what we do. We construct a list of widgets. We set them with some properties. We add the client struct, because the client struct is used for initializing it. And then we add it to a list at the end and return it to our grid, our tile. Here, that is where we set the client struct, just really storing them as a reference, because exactly that struct will be then used in this initialize view that we call, and yeah, will be broken down, and we will do all the transformations and data storages that we saw. Yeah, that's the list to add, and here we just return it. Okay. Yeah, here we are kind of at the end. That's the last stage really. And yeah, kind of recapping it. Important, you have a couple of different layers. The different layers will play a huge role when we route inputs into it. Next video. Then we have 2 structural layers. The one is defining the columns, the other one defining the rows of the widget, of the inventory widget. One of the core widgets is the inventory grid, and that inventory grid is filled with certain items. It's of course just the first one here, yeah. So you kind of have to repeat the very same with a map, with the crafting, with the paper doll, with whatever you need really. You see, you will end up with literally dozens of these widgets that you have to manipulate. One small thing, project settings. If you use the common UI, you have to set one thing. Go to your engine, go to general settings, look for viewport. And here you have the game viewport client class, and that needs to be set to common game viewport client, not to game viewport client. So the common needs to be here, otherwise it will not route your input. The whole thing about routing input, that is something I will look into the next video, how to use input here. Then we would go to the common input settings. We would put input data into it. And then the important thing actually is we will have a lot of different platforms that we support. And that is where you can define what kind of navigation elements does the user see? What kind of routing happens when the user is pressing a key? Because the same key will do different things, especially on a controller, depending on the inventory layer or on the widget layer that you see. And when we are ready there, we can use our first inventory here. You see, we drop some things, empty now, and we fill it up again. So all the base information are there. What is definitely missing is everything around input routing, support of a controller and mouse and keyboard. And then of course, functionality wise, even the grid needs something like drag and drop, like dropping manually. All the things that you have to run against barriers at the moment here should be of course core functionality of the grid. Not talking about all the things that are empty, the left column, the right column, and so on. And this here is also something for the later future. But nevertheless, we have a working inventory. Actually not that complicated to create. The common UI is helping you a lot. So it's a good start, I think. And from here, we will kind of continue to develop the UI and hopefully have something at one point that is usable. Good, that's the end. As always, would love to have you subscribing to the chat, and see you soon. Thank you, bye.